The hollowed ship. The Normandy's sensors had detected the derelict 3 days ago. Tumbling through the void between systems like a broken prayer, Commander Jane Shepard stood before the bridge's main display, studying the twisted silhouette that filled the screen. What had once been a Reaper vessel now resembled nothing so much as a massive metallic corpse, its surface pocked with craters, its terrible geometry warped by some unimaginable violence. "Readings are inconsistent, Commander," reported Eddie, the ship's AI. Her holographic form flickered with what might have been uncertainty. "The vessel appears to be completely dead, yet I'm detecting faint energy signatures deep within its core." Shepard's jaw tightened. She'd faced Reapers before. Their terrible efficiency, their cold logic. But this felt different. Wrong. Any signs of life? None that I can identify. However, the hull's composition is interfering with deep scans. I cannot guarantee the ship is entirely vacant. Garrus Vicarian approached from the weapons console, his scarred face grave. "Shepard, we don't need to board that thing. We could analyze it from here, report back to the Alliance, and let someone else walk into whatever's waiting in there." Shepard shook her head. "No, if there's intel about Reaper technology aboard, we need it. But I won't ask anyone to come with me." "You won't have to ask," said Liara Tizoni, stepping forward. The Asari's blue skin seemed pale in the bridge's artificial light. "I've studied Reaper artifacts before. My expertise could prove valuable." Talazora joined them, her environmental suit's visor reflecting the derelict's image. "And someone needs to monitor the technical systems. If that ship has any active defenses," Shepard looked at each of her companions, friends who had followed her through hell itself. "All right, but we go in prepared for anything." The airlock cycled with a sound like grinding bones. Shepard stepped through first, her rifle raised, the beam of her helmet light cutting through absolute darkness. The air inside the Reaper ship was stale and cold, carrying a metallic taste that made her mouth water with nausea. "Atmosphere is breathable," reported Talai, her voice crackling through the comm. "Barely. High concentration of metallic particles. I'd recommend keeping suits sealed." They moved through corridors that defied conventional architecture. The walls curved at impossible angles, and the floor seemed to shift beneath their feet, though Shepard's rational mind knew it was just the play of shadows in their helmet lights. Everything was wrong. The proportions, the silence, the way their footsteps echoed with a hollow, hungry sound. "The design is consistent with other Reaper vessels I've encountered," Liara whispered, running her gloved hand along a wall that gleamed like black glass. "But there's something different about the energy patterns here." They had been walking for 20 minutes when Garrus stopped abruptly. "Motion sensor," he said, his voice tight. "Something just moved. About 50 meters ahead." Shepard raised her fist, halting the squad. She enhanced her visor's display, scanning the corridor ahead. At first she saw nothing. Then, at the very edge of her light beam, something shifted. A shadow within shadows. "Cyan?" she breathed. But as they crept closer, Shepard realized she was wrong. This had been a Cyan once, a grotesque fusion of Batarian, Turian, and human remains that the Reapers had crafted into a living weapon. Now it was something else entirely. The creature's multiple arms hung at unnatural angles, and where its eyes should have been, empty sockets wept a substance that looked like liquid metal. It moved with jerky, uncertain steps, as if it had forgotten how its own limbs worked. "By the goddess," Liara gasped. "What happened to it?" The thing that had been a Cyan suddenly stopped moving. Its head, a nightmarish fusion of organic and synthetic parts, turned toward them with mechanical precision. When it opened its mouth, no sound emerged. Instead, the air itself seemed to vibrate with a frequency that made their bones ache. "It's trying to communicate," Talai said, her voice filled with horrified fascination. "But the process is broken, corrupted." More shapes emerged from the darkness. Dozens of them, former Cyan husks, all showing the same terrible deterioration. They moved like sleepwalkers, their augmented limbs dragging across the metal floor with sounds like breaking glass. "They're not attacking," Garrus observed, his rifle trained on the nearest creature. "What are they waiting for?" As if in answer to his question, a new sound echoed through the corridor, a low, thrumming pulse that seemed to come from the ship itself. The deformed Cyans suddenly straightened, their movements becoming more coordinated. They began to converge on the squad's position. "Move," Shepard barked. They ran through twisting passages that seemed to rearrange themselves in their peripheral vision. Behind them, the sound of dragging limbs and grinding metal grew louder. The Cyans weren't fast, but they were relentless, and there seemed to be more of them with each turn. "There," Liara pointed to a massive doorway ahead. Some kind of central chamber. They burst through the entrance and found themselves in a vast spherical room. The walls were covered in a network of pulsing tubes that glowed with sickly bioluminescence. At the center of the chamber, Suspended in a web of organic cables hung something that might once have been a Reaper's central intelligence. "Is that," Talai began. "A Reaper mind," Liara finished. "But it's dying, has been for a long time." The thing in the center of the room was indeed dying, but not peacefully. Its metallic surface was cracked and oozing, and the tubes connected to it pulsed erratically. As they watched, it emitted that same bone-deep vibration they had heard before. "It's trying to maintain control of the husks," Shepard realized. "But the connection is breaking down. That's why they're wrong." The Scions had followed them into the chamber. They arranged themselves in a loose circle around the squad, but made no move to attack. Instead, they began to emit their own vibrations, a discordant harmony that made the air itself seem to weep. "They're in pain," Liara said suddenly. "All of them. The Reaper mind, the husks. They're trapped in a dying system, unable to function properly, unable to die. Then we put them out of their misery," Garrus said, raising his rifle toward the central intelligence. "Wait," Shepard held up a hand. Something was happening. The nearest Scion had approached her, its ruined face turned up toward hers. When it reached out with one malformed hand, she didn't step back. The creature's touch was cold but not hostile. Through her armor's sensors, she could detect the faintest electrical current. Not an attack, but an attempt at communication. Images flooded her mind. Not words, but emotions and sensations. Fear, confusion, endless grinding pain. And underneath it all, a desperate plea for release. "They're asking us to help them," she said softly. "They want to die." The Reaper intelligence's glow intensified as if it had heard her words. The tubes connecting it to the ship's systems began to pulse more rapidly, and the Scions around them straightened further, their movements becoming almost human. "Shepard," Talai warned, "energy readings are spiking. Whatever's happening, it's building to something. It's trying to communicate directly," Liara said, her eyes wide with understanding. "The Reaper mind, it's using the last of its power to reach us." The vibrations in the air coalesced into something almost like speech. A voice made of grinding metal and electronic static. "Please, end this. The whole ship is connected to that thing," Shepard said, understanding flooding through her. "If we can sever the connection." "The explosion would destroy everything aboard," Garrus pointed out. "Including us," Talai added pragmatically. Shepard looked around at the circle of malformed Scions, at the dying intelligence that had once been part of a machine dedicated to galactic extinction. Now it was just a broken thing, suffering and alone. "There's an escape pod bay near the docking port," she said finally. "Talai, can you set charges on the main power conduits?" "Already thinking 3 steps ahead of you, Commander." As Talai worked, the Reaper intelligence seemed to sense what they were planning. The light emanating from its form grew brighter, and the Scions began to move, not toward the squad but toward the walls of the chamber. They pressed their hands against the metal surfaces, and the ship itself seemed to sigh. "They're saying goodbye," Liara whispered. "To each other. To existence." The charges were set. As they made their way back through the corridors toward the escape pods, the Scions lined their path like an honor guard. None of them moved to follow. "Charges are armed," Talai reported as they reached the pod bay. 30 seconds. They sealed themselves into the escape pod just as the first explosions began. Through the small viewport, Shepard watched the Reaper ship tear itself apart from within. The detonations spread through its hull like veins of fire, and for just a moment she could have sworn she saw faces in the flames. Peaceful faces, finally at rest. "Mission accomplished," Garrus said quietly. But Shepard was thinking about the touch of that dying Scion's hand, about the gratitude she had felt in those final moments of contact. Sometimes, she realized, the greatest victory wasn't in defeating your enemy, it was in recognizing when that enemy was no longer your enemy at all, but simply another soul in need of mercy. The escape pod's engines fired, carrying them away from the expanding debris field. Behind them, the Reaper ship died at last, taking its cargo of tortured minds into the peace of the void. In the pod's cramped confines, none of them spoke for a long time. There were some missions, Shepard knew, that changed you in ways that couldn't be measured or reported. Some victories that felt like defeats, and some acts of mercy that required more courage than any battle. "Normandy, this is Shepard," she finally said into her comm. "Mission complete. Requesting pickup." "Acknowledged, Commander," came Edie's response. "Was the derelict what you expected?" Shepard closed her eyes, remembering the sound of metal grinding against metal, the weight of desperate hope in a dying machine's plea. "No, Eddie," she said. "It was something else entirely. Something that would stay with her long after they returned to the familiar safety of the Normandy. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, compassion could still light the way home."